What's up, everybody? Wes, Dead Air Knife here with Always.
Typical Lydia.
Today's show, we're going to be doing the 1964 Gothic classic Castle of Blood, aka Danza Macabra. It's my theremin.
That's a perfect theremin. I saw a video of cats playing theremin, and I was like, those talented bastards. Lucky little guys. I wish I had a theremin. And I wish I had watched this movie every single month of my life since I was about 14, because this is so much me, so me. And it is like I gained 7,000 goth points just watching it.
I'm really glad you liked it. This is a joint Wes Lydia pick. Now, Lids had very much enjoyed our trip to Gothic horror with our previous film in the previous episode and wasn't quite ready to leave the castles just yet. So we decided to put on our thinking caps and then decide on another Gothic horror that we could possibly do. And for this, I decided to suggest Danza Macabra, or Castle of Blood, Italian Gothic from the 1960s, starring the incomparable Barbara Steele.
She is so amazing in this too. I mean, there are two women in this movie that are so surreal in their beauty. It is just a joy to watch. A joy to watch. The men are great too. Whatever. There's other women in it too that are pretty, like the whole thing. But you get this, and I'll probably pull this out again. This Betty and Veronica, for lack of a better analogy, of the, beautiful raven-haired, alabaster skin Barbara Steele up against her counterpart, whose name eludes me at the moment. Just a gorgeous blonde.
That is the character of Julia, played by Marguerite Robson, a stunning, stunning woman.
Yeah, absolutely stunning. That's the best word for it. Just absolutely beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And I mean, we've seen a lot of beautiful people on film. That's what film is about in a lot of ways. Unless that is what the story you're telling. You're going to go and watch the movie The Border. That's not about beauty. That's not what it's about. You're going to watch a movie, about somebody like, the Human Centipede 2 is not about beauty. But when it is, boy, does this movie deliver. If that's what you want candelabras in dank, stony passageways of a probably haunted castle. This fits the bill. Holy shit. And you knocked it out of the park, because I was like, I kind of want frilly candelabras in the dark haunted castle. And you were like, well, here you go. You wrote me a prescription for Danza Macabra.
This film was a recent discovery for me. I had told Lydia just before we started the episode, I stumbled upon it, which is the best thing about going out into the meat space and going to stores that have physical media. I'm a physical media collector, and it's great to have all of these labels that put out cool stuff, have them on your social media. But are we checking our phones 24/7? No. Do things get bogged down in a million other different things? Absolutely. And so this was a release by Severin, who is really one of my favorite little boutique labels, because I feel as though they release good stuff and the cost is reasonable. And I was captivated by the cover art of this Blu-ray, and it was black and white. I could definitely see, I couldn't really tell, are we these vampires, are these zombies, or these, what are these? Newsflash, you'll still be asking that question by the time the end of the fucking movie happens. But I kind of put it down because I wasn't in the, I was like, we're not buying anything today, we're just looking, but I couldn't get it out of my head. And it was one of those things that I became kind of fixated on, where you walk out of a store and I'm thinking about that movie. I don't know if this happens to anybody else that's not a fucking freak like me. But I'm thinking about it and I'm thinking about it, and I go home and I do some research and I watch the trailer, but then I can see that there's versions on YouTube and stuff, but I'm like, wow, I really want this fucking movie. Like, it's got Barbara Steele in it. This is going to be good. I know it's going to be good. This looks cool. And so I just went ahead and pulled the trigger and bought the Blu-ray. And boy, was I glad that I did. I became very obsessed with this film. I wasn't sure that I was going to bring it to the show, because I did end up making a video about it on my TikTok channel. And so I kind of felt like, oh, well, I got that out of my system and it was just a cool movie. But when you had suggested doing another Gothic horror, and you specifically said you're not ready to leave the castle, because we did Nosferatu last time, this was the first one that jumped to mind.
It is so perfect too. And on that literary edge too, I could have said, oh, I want to watch a movie about like Lovecraft or Poe that's sort of like a tangential story, maybe not a remake of one of their stories, because one's been done to death and one's never done right, but something like that. And this would have fit that bill too, because I was pleasantly surprised by the inclusion of our friend, my friend and yours, Edgar Allan Poe, in sort of like a fictional way. He's like a character in this book. And it does say like it's based on Danse Macabre by Edgar Allan Poe at the beginning on the title screens. It's not true. There's no Danse Macabre by Edgar Allan Poe. It's sort of tangentially similar to some of his ideas in things, but not really. So it's not based on Edgar Allan Poe's story. We'll settle that, but it does feature Edgar Allan Poe. So I don't know if that was just confusion, or if they deliberately tried to mislead the audience into thinking it was, or if they felt that there was enough of a tie to his body of work that it's influenced by Edgar Allan Poe. Like maybe we misunderstood the interpretation of based on.
I think that really it's just a way into the story, because it's Edgar Allan Poe's Castle of Blood, or Edgar Allan Poe's Danza Macabre. And you have this intriguing, almost what if story, that Poe is telling this story that intrigues a journalist who's a skeptic. And then imagine if it went on this fantastic tale that isn't really about Poe, but it's bookend nicely with Poe, and having him as this character in a bar. And we'll go on to like how ridiculous the introduction and meeting of this character and how this story kicks off when we get into the meat of the plot. But I think it just so embodies the vibe, particularly the weird, almost ethereal pseudo-science, pseudo-medicine talk that seems so outlandish, but also so appropriate for people that would be alive in this time period. The logic that they would be spinning now in modern ears is outrageous, but back then, this sort of cockamamie shit would seem somehow logical. I'm speaking specifically of our good friend Carmus, who is, wow. Anyway, so I think that it was this intriguing bit of extra detail that, again, I went in totally blind. I watched the trailer, but that was pretty much it. And so when I had that moment of realization, like, is he fucking talking to Edgar Allan Poe? He kind of looks like he would be Edgar Allan Poe. That's so interesting and weird.
It sort of fits with his haunted palace thing and the like big resurgence that Edgar Allan Poe has enjoyed. Like, you can't enjoy shit when you're dead, but he has his estate, his memory has enjoyed this resurgence, a cyclical resurgence, and he's going under another one now, which is really, really helpful, because a lot of people would more readily recognize the Edgar Allan Poe character, I think, at this point.
Yeah, and this is a bit of an outlier compared to a lot of the old Vincent Price Poe adaptations. This is another way to do it, in which, as I said, it's really more of a feeling or an aesthetic than an actual direct adaptation of any one of his stories, but it feels like perhaps it could have been a Poe story, and perhaps that is good enough. And I feel like Poe kind of comes around every generation. Anytime that there's young, disenfranchised people who want to really lean into the darkies, they pretty much all start with Poe, don't they?
They really do. You know, you could go way back into like Walpole, or you could go back into Machen, or you could go back into like the beginnings of like Polidori's vampire, or Frankenstein. But if you want like really psychologically gothic stuff, or psychologically dark, and with a bit of crime and murder mystery and a hint of gore for real in it, then Edgar Allan Poe is your guy. I'm no Poe expert, of course, so I don't even know if he went to London. I'd like to think he did. I don't know much about him. He didn't seem like a guy that had enough money to get from Baltimore to London, so I don't like really know. But our good friend Sean Moreland is a professor here in Ottawa. He is a Poe expert. He's definitely a Poe expert, and he spoke on this subject a lot. So I'd love to pick his brain on this sort of idea of Poe. I mean, a lot of us have seen the movie The Raven and have seen sort of like, I don't know, dramatizations of his life, and especially the end of his life, which is so tragic and quite goth to begin with. But like, this sort of like fantastical take on it, and sort of just drawing all of the dread and the tension and the yeah, the, I don't know, the weak and weary and wan kind of feel that you get when you're reading good Poe. Well, that's all good. It's kind of all good, right? That's the best part about Edgar Allan Poe, is that it's kind of all good. It's not just the Raven. If you like the meter and the timbre and the rhythm of the Raven, and that's what you like about Poe, is like really being sucked into the motion of the poem, I highly recommend The Bells. That is like amazing to read out loud. A wonderful poem. If you like the like more dark versions, like his short stories are a whole other mood, right? This film is really a mood. I could see why you would get like low-key obsessed with this, because it is definitely a mood. And it's a mood that some people have always tried to cultivate. It's a mood that some people were born with, if they happen to be born out in the countryside in a haunted farmland in an old Victorian farmhouse. And there's other people who this is all new to. So it's like you would be, all of a sudden find yourself completely enraptured by the mood that this film creates, let alone Edgar Allan Poe's work, right? It really works for some people. I think that this would have a broader appeal. So I'm shocked that it's not more popular.
There is a reality that we are often faced with when there is just so much coming out at any given time that things inevitably get lost in the shuffle. Now, this film's release date is 1964, but the reality is this film was completed in 1962. Now, for horror history enthusiasts, you would remember that Mario Bava's incredible debut film, Black Sunday, also starring Barbara Steele, came out in 1960. So this is right on the heels of this. Barbara Steele becoming synonymous with Italian Gothic horror. She very famously came to the United States for a film career, left the United States because of not film opportunities, and then that went on to the heels of a actor strike, and so she could continue to work. She took a lot of roles in Italy and became kind of one of the earliest, I'm not going to call her a scream queen, but just a ubiquitous image within horror. Now, she's done a lot of other things from that. She's not entirely thrilled with being known mostly for horror, but I mean, what an enchanting presence on screen, and you can't blame anybody for being mesmerized by this woman, her incredible talent, grace, beauty, all of that. If you can't tell, I'm a massive Barbara Steele fan. But this film got lost in the mix and wasn't released. There's conflicting reasons why it wasn't released until 1964, but ultimately that doesn't matter. It was released in 1964, by then being swallowed up by just the onslaught of Italian Gothic horror that was being released in this time period. So who knows what else? Sometimes when we're talking about horror decade per decade, there's the same 15, 20, 30, 35, sometimes even 50, 60 films that everyone talks about. But you need to remember that hundreds of films were also released within the same genre. And so the things that float to the top tend to be the ones that are either excellent or so bad you can't believe these things exist. But amongst all of that is hidden gems like this that deserve people's attention that just don't get it.
I would like a list, please, of all the films that are just a little more, mediocre than the top films of the year made in Italy that are Gothic horror. Please, thank you. It's like, I would like to have a better record of these. And we were talking before the show, the same thing happened in my mind with Nosferatu. There was so many other lost films around that era. There was a lot more horror films filmed experimentally or with larger budgets by better known filmmakers that have never seen the light of day, just because, like that hit song from 1970 that no one can remember, they just get lost. And not because of misfortune, not typically for nefarious reasons. They're not pushed down and squashed and meant to be forgotten or engineered to be forgotten. They are just accidentally forgotten. So I bet you there's 20 other films just like this flanking it in time. And you would like to think that it would have, more presence, because it features an older gentleman that was very famous at the time, and it's a footnote in his career. It features Barbara Steele, of course. The other girl was she a Norwegian actress? I don't remember if she was
I believe you're right, yes.
Yeah, she was, but very famous in Norway and not so much here. And famous for scandalous reason, which you think would make more headlines in IMDb or whatever, but no. And then it also had a little bit of horror royalty in my mind. There was a young man named Ruggero Deodato who worked as an assistant to an assistant. He did something like a gaffer, or he was a hand, or an assistant helper to the director of photography or something. Not a big role, but he went on to make Cannibal Holocaust. An extremely famous director in horror was getting his footing in the film industry on this film. Still a footnote in his career.
And there's a little bit of a tie-in with him because there's some animal cruelty in this film that, it definitely sticks out like a sore thumb, and then you find out he worked on it. You're like, I'm not saying they're connected, but I am saying it's a bit of an interesting coincidence. When you were talking about lost films, it couldn't help but remind me of Mary Philbin. Mary Philbin famously played Christine in the Phantom of the Opera in 1925, and I had recently done a video on that for my channel, and I also love the Phantom of the Opera. That was a massive fucking production. Would you like to know the movies that she did after that? Lost. This was one of the biggest fucking stars in one of the biggest fucking movies, and 4 of her movies after this are lost. I think the percentage is ridiculous. It's somewhere in the 90th percentile of films that were made versus films that we have anymore, and they're all just lost.
Mm-hmm. Not only because film is explosive, let alone just flammable, and storage isn't what it is, and it's full of acids that eat it away. And I have a big box of fucking semi properly stored film that is literally disintegrating in my closet. So, I get it. I get that it's ephemeral for the most part. And we've only really understood how ephemeral and fragile film is to now, but there's been film preservation for quite some time that they couldn't save so much of it. Is just sad. Just so sad.
Really, truly. But enough with sadness. It's time for the gladness. What is this movie even about, anyways, Lydia? We got to tell them.
Death is the obvious reply. And when is this most melancholy of topics most poetical? When it is closely allied to beauty itself. The death, then, of a beautiful woman is unquestionably the most poetical topic in the world. Or a beautiful man, because at the end we got a kind of final boy situation going on. But that is a quote from what Edgar Allan Poe is saying in the carriage on the way to this haunted palace where they're going to deliver his journalist friend, or erstwhile journalist friend, to the haunted mansion. And this journalist is trying to get his idea on melancholy. What unfolds is probably one of the most upbeat melancholy films I've ever seen.
That's just downright beautiful. Fun fact, if you were to watch the Castle of Blood version of this film, which was made for the United States, almost 10 minutes cut from the film, including that scene in the carriage. So for whatever reason, Alan Foster and company leave the bar, and then they end up just at the mansion, and they decided to not have the journalist, ask Edgar Allan Poe some questions before he writes his expose that he wants to do. Now, this film starts off with the exact right type of atmosphere. We have a journalist. It's almost like Stephen King wrote this. A writer of some kind enters a bar, the Four Devils, and goes into this place, goes down into the basement, and there, holding court, telling a scary story, is Edgar Allan Poe himself. And Alan listens to it derisively. You could see he's got this amused, sort of mildly amused look on his face, let's say, which is going to be a theme of Alan, because he doesn't really modulate too much. He's kind of the definition of a stiff upper lip, but he is a man of London after all. And so he is going to rebuke Edgar Allan Poe's story, and then they're going to get into a debate about the existence of ghosts and the afterlife.
Which is the kind of debate you want to have with Edgar Allan Poe. By God, I only wish I would have been around some more of the authors that I loved. I wish I would have been born in this time and in that bar while he often recited the Raven publicly. Like if you poke him with a stick, he'd recite the Raven apparently. Like just a wonderful time to be alive. And yeah, if you ever get a chance to talk to your favorite authors or creators, take it up, whether you're a journalist or not, ask some questions. People like to talk about their craft, and Edgar Allan Poe in this film is no exception. He wants to debate, converse. He'll answer questions. That's fine. But it's not long before they're interrupted. This scene doesn't go on too long. And it's also partially in French.
Yes. I heard tale that children used to linger behind Edgar Allan Poe as he walked through the streets, and he would turn and say, "Nevermore!" And the children would scurry and run, because that was the scariest thing in the 1800s, gang. It's saying, "Nevermore!"
Yeah.
But, times have indeed changed. Now, there's this other person who seems to be more of a believer, and his point is there is this nearby castle, Liz, you gotta understand, and this is a classic Scooby-Doo spend the night here and inherit a fortune type thing. He initially makes the bet with Alan for £100, but as Alan would point out, quite amusingly, there's not that kind of money in the pockets of any honest journalist. And so they shrink the bet down to £10, and agree to go to the Castle of Blackwood. And this castle is apparently alive with activity, very specifically between November 1st and November 2nd.
Now, All Souls, All Saints, Halloween. So this is basically the night before Halloween or the night after Halloween. Like that.
That's
Talk
right,
about
yeah.
being in a London bar, hanging out with Edgar Allan Poe the day after Halloween. Oh my God. But this is very similar to the premise of Hell House in a way. You're going to a place overnight, you're being offered money to try and do this, like stay overnight. 12 Nights at Rotter House is like it too, where you're bet that you can't stay there. I had to look up, as I often do, what 10 pounds at the time would have been in today's money. I guess 10 British pounds, it would be sterling at the time, I think. 10 pounds would be...
Yeah, I think you might be right.
Yeah, like it's not the same as a pound is now, and it's like a British pound, and it's not the same as a euro, of course, very different currency, but 10 pounds in Canadian money right now would be $16,600. I don't have $16,000 either, so I would be like betting a pound because, you know, that's still a lot of money at the time.
It really is, but Alan seems convinced that this is all just nonsense, and he plans to write a story about it, a definitive story about his experiences with Edgar Allan Poe. They head off into the coach together. Alan asks him some appropriate questions to get a vibe of the situation, and then we are going to enter Castle Blackwood. We don't have to wait long to get to this. Fun fact: the castle exterior is a real place, but the interiors we are going to be exploring were made for another film. This other film was a big comedy starring what at the time was a fairly popular Italian comedian. After that movie wrapped and they kind of realized that they had all of these gorgeous castle sets, they thought to themselves, well, shouldn't we make a horror movie to make use of all of the sets that we built for this comedy? And so that's what they did. This film literally being made because they had the sets lying around. Why waste them? They spent all that money on them.
Something you see repeated with like Full Moon Pictures does this sort of thing, sort of piggybacking on a different production or piggybacking on their own production. We've mentioned this sort of tactic a couple times in other movies, and it's just nice to see that this is a tactic that has never died, and it's always been sort of a thing, like, oh, look around this gorgeous set, let's, you know, doesn't it remind you of the Addams Family house? Let's make some sort of horror. I'm really glad that they did this because it is so pitch perfect, and we get to know this area quite intimately. Now, before we get into Alan's, like, I don't know, odyssey into this area and the filmmaking tactics used here, did your copy have only English? Was it subtitled for the French portions and the Italian portions? Because there's really 3 languages going on in this, and not since watching Farinelli have I seen a film that really, or maybe even Amadeus does it too, where they sort of, like with such alacrity, sort of dance between all these different languages throughout the film. Did yours like just dub it all?
So if you watch the Castle of Blood version, you are going to be watching it all in English. If you watch the Danza Macabra version, there are 2 ways that you can watch this film. You can watch it either entirely in Italian, or you can watch it in the traditional Italian way. This practice was not uncommon, and in fact, we've even covered films like this that they hide it later in ADR. They get whatever native language speaker to speak their dialogue in their language, and they'll dub over it later if they need to. So I watched both times that I've watched this film, I watched the all Italian Danza Macabra version. I've never actually watched the Castle of Blood version because there's 10 minutes missing from the movie, and that is just unacceptable to me.
Yeah, it makes no sense with something that doesn't even have a very beefy runtime to begin with. Why cut out even a minute of this. And it is so atmospheric. I wouldn't want to ruin it at all, you know? Like it's like watching Hell House and cutting out all the scenes of the cat walking around outside on the gate. Like, no, you need that, desperately need that. I couldn't see a minute that should be cut out of this film whatsoever. So it's weird that they would decide to. I mean, but be that as it may, it has so far been ultra atmospheric. The bar itself is this dingy pub basement. The carriage ride is dark and dreary, and the topic is melancholy. So of course they're having a darker conversation. It's like nearing midnight. I guess it's got to be. I don't know if he shows up right at midnight or is it 6 o'clock. Is he going 6 p.m. to 6 in the morning and it's just dark already because it's fall?
It's gotta be, because I get the sense that, well, maybe not, but it has to be. They seem to have been in a hurry. Like, they basically make Poe down the rest of his beer. Like, we have to go tonight.
Yeah.
We have to go like right now. So assuming that the carriage ride wasn't that far, let's say 30, 40 minutes by carriage, it's got to be, let's just say 9 to 10 o'clock is by the time he probably arrived at the castle at the very least, because it is dark and foggy the moment he gets there.
I feel there's a nod to Lovecraft here in that they're saying that it's in Providence. So I thought, well, how far away is the heart of London to this Providence area of the UK, of London, of England? And there's no Providence area in England. There used to be a Providence Street in Whitechapel, though. So that would make some sense if they're, using this nod to Lovecraft by calling something Providence, but it is just Whitechapel. Then it's like, oh, okay, they could just hustle over to Whitechapel. There used to be this Providence Street in Whitechapel, no Providence Hill. So I don't know. I think it is just strictly a nod to Lovecraft, but we're pretending that it's Whitechapel, and it feels very Whitechapel.
It really does. It also kind of feels like they're partially out into the countryside, but I can't really tell if it is just because the castle grounds are quite extensive. But we were going to have an astonishing moment in this film that the first time I watched it, I completely missed it. Then it was pointed out to me by a film historian that was on the Blu-ray that I had watched, because I had watched all the extra features after I'd watched the film. And he points out that in a movie that is a little over 90 minutes long, there is a 12-minute sequence right when Alan Foster arrives at this castle where there is no dialogue. From the moment he says goodbye to Poe and his companion, whose name escapes me, there's no dialogue until he muses to himself looking at Julia's painting. And he is going to explore the outside. There's a graveyard. He's going to look at the trees. He is going to look into the barn. He is going to go into the main hall. He is going to look at the dining hall. He's going to go upstairs into the bedrooms, all while hiding a candelabra. No internal dialogue, no talking to himself, no other characters breaking the scene, no cuts to anything. It's just him walking around this castle. And to our listeners, you need to understand the discipline that it takes, because you are asking a lot of your audience in the 1960s. It's like, oh, movies were slower, and no, they weren't. It's just to have this long languid scene in which you are really exploring these gorgeous sets that were built. And you could tell that they were proud of them. They wanted you to know the layout of this castle, and it is so effective, and it is so cozy, eerie, and I am transfixed at this use of silence.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, the only way I could equate it, like if you don't want to watch this film or haven't, but want to have an idea of like the discipline that it would take without the stimulus, is take your cell phone out of your pocket, put it, I don't know, on your desk, on top of your fridge, somewhere else, throw it in the middle of your bed, and then go into a washroom and turn off the lights and close the door, close the toilet seat lid, or you can do that with the lights on, whatever, your choice. But sit down and start a timer for 12 minutes. And don't look at the timer. Don't have the timer in there with you. Have it wherever your phone is, I guess. And see how you feel about 12 minutes with no stimulus. You will be wishing for, I don't know, a gum wrapper to fold up in 12 different ways or something. You would be wishing for a book on art history. Anything gets interesting in 12 minutes of silence. So luckily, we're treated with this gorgeous mansion castle, the Blackwood estate, this gorgeous place, this palace, if you will, and ever-changing scenery. And you can see his mood sort of going level by level lower as he traverses this place. And I guess it's on one hand making sure he's safe, because this is what I would do. This is what you would want to do. It's not just like, reveling. And he's not really reveling in all the gorgeous tapestries and the amount of candles and the richness, because it is furnished and it's it's sort of dusty and it has some cobwebs, but it's not unkept, so it's like a gorgeous place. He's not really reveling in that, and he's not really overtly checking for his safety and behind every window and door and looking for weapons or whatever, any of that sort of stuff. It's sort of a mix of that, where he's just sort of strolling around. He strolls past a massive sarcophagus and doesn't even really look at it. He's just like, yeah, all this stuff, getting the lay of the land. That's really about it. And sort of, I guess, checking to see if people are there, but his mood is slowly, his face is becoming a little more rigid, and he's just a little bit like, okay, this place is vast. I'm really alone. I don't believe in ghosties, beasties, and four-legged creepies or whatever. So he's like just becoming a little more comfortable and stoic. I had sort of had a spoiler for this, because I had pulled up the script at one point, and I knew that the next line in the script was something where he was looking in a mirror and saying, oh, it's just my reflection. So I was sort of waiting for that point. So I was very aware of this 12 minutes passing.
That's what I was going to ask you. Because the first time, I admit, I didn't even really notice. But I like that you use the expression getting the lay of the land, because I think that this technique meant that I knew at any given point during the story exactly where we were in the castle. I recognized all of the parts and all of the sets that he explores, dilapidated and moldering and covered in cobwebs and dust. We will see at various states of decay over presumably the 10 years in which this estate has declined. But it was so, I'm not saying that I need it for every movie, but I just thought that this was such a neat thing to see in the movie, where I felt as familiar with the grounds as someone who would be staying there, because Alan Foster is going to show us all of these areas of the castle, and none of the set is wasted, because everything gets returned to, sometimes several times into the course of the storyline. But Alan is not going to be alone for long. He is going to gaze up into this hauntingly beautiful photograph or oil painting of this blonde woman, this just eternal beauty up on the wall. And he is captivated by this and begins to play. It's like a organ piano. It's like kind of like those combination ones. And
like a clavichord or something.
Oh, yeah. Okay. And all of a sudden, he is going to be introduced to the lovely Elizabeth Barbara Steele. And what would you call this? A whirlwind love affair?
I guess. And back in the day, there were less people to go around, right? So, I mean, you'd probably fall in love pretty quickly with someone who has
It's like instant.
bright eyes and clean skin.
When I was watching these two interact with each other, I was like, well, like it's the hot-blooded Italians. Like it's like, mi amor. It's it's easy to see how Elizabeth gets into the jams that she's in with how readily she is able to fall in love with somebody pretty much at first sight, because she speaks to Alan for all of 5 minutes in their first encounter and then maybe 2 minutes by their second encounter. And she explains that this is a lonely place. There's no servants, there's no nothing anymore. So the upkeep has kind of gone downhill, but she does live in this castle, so it's not abandoned. And people do visit, but they only seem to ever visit at this time of year.
She owes it all to her brother, uh, the Duke, I guess, or whatever, Mr. Blackwood, who sends people here once a year. It's the only company she really gets. So she looks forward to it. And I don't blame her. But she's sort of fibbing here because there is somebody else in this castle. There's a few other people in this castle. So she's not all that alone, really, honestly. But I guess she would feel kind of alone, being
Yeah,
so gorgeous as she is.
I know, right? Just so beautiful and perfect and most beautiful hair. She will eventually woo Alan, who loves to, you know, spit game at this beautiful lady until Julia comes in. Now, Julia is my favorite kind of hostile. She is just very stiff upper lip, and she says general pleasantries, but then also has a scathing comment every couple of seconds for poor Elizabeth, who is immediately offended because, she kind of got caught just like, oh, you're going to turn in for the night. And, oh, I guess she's probably just going to be staying with you. And she'll even go so far behind a door to call her a harlot.
Which, I could see why they got this Betty and Veronica thing going on immediately.
Yeah.
Really, what it reminded me of was Double Digest right away. They're going to fight over the man in a way, fight over each other. People are going to ship them, as people say, whether you need to or not. And yeah, and Elizabeth is truly beautiful, but with Julia. This is that actress that is the Norwegian actress, Marguerite Robsham. I did write her name down. Um, right away, they get into a conversation where we are let known as the audience that they are not regular ladies. And I love that we're not gonna sit there like there are some things about them and everyone in this castle that by the end we don't have a lot of answers, but we're not wondering that all through the film. Like we're not waiting for a reveal about what are they? Are they aware of what they are? We get sort of a glimpse into that right away.
We really do. And we also get some very subtle hints from Julia that perhaps their relationship is not exactly platonic. And this is a very interesting aspect of it because it becomes overt later on in the story. But when they are arguing with each other about Alan once they go downstairs, and to me, it's very interesting because there's several moments in this film in which the whole thing becomes preposterous when you remember that they're basically ghosts. And so, could you imagine being dead and for all eternity being in this castle and you're still like hurrying someone downstairs to yell about a boy with them and to conspire with each other as spirits? So often ghosts are portrayed in horror as echoes of the past. They are these sorrowful entities that are doomed to repeat their past and would definitely not understand in the fullest capacity that they're even dead. Not true with these characters. They're fully aware of what they are, what they're doing, and also that Elizabeth loves him. And they use the word love. You love him, don't you? And she's like, yes, I love him. I'm like, lady, you have talked to him for 10 minutes. You're throwing around the love word. Like, I don't even mean to be like the Fonz over here, like, la, 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 la. But it's a little ridiculous. But you go with it because, like you said, less people to choose from. They're gorgeous ladies. He's a handsome dude. But Julia seems to be more offended by the idea that Elizabeth is going back to men because Elizabeth will say, I'm a real woman. And she's like, this is the 1960s, and she needs a man. So not the most progressive opinion that Elizabeth could have. Her dalliance with women was only a mistake, perhaps. But this is going to culminate into her joining Alan Foster again later on in the evening. I guess Foster has it in his mind that, oh, I'm just about to get 10 pounds really easy because I'm just going to go to bed. There's an idea that no one's ever had before. I could just win this bet by sleeping.
And it's obviously not haunted because people live here, right? From his point of view, because they didn't come to him and say that they're ghosts, bisexual or lesbian ghosts at that. And it does say something about bi erasure with Elizabeth sort of denying that she could be both. She could sway both ways. But, and she could even be in a polyamorous relationship at this point if she really played her cards right. But no, she has to be feisty about it. Feisty and flippant and hot blooded, as you say. Yeah. I really
Mm-hmm.
do like him being kind of kept in the dark, and willfully so, because it sort of harkens back to Nosferatu with like, well, I'm just going to go to bed and read this little book about vampires and throw it on the floor because it's ridiculous.
I'll never not love making fun of 1922 Hutter. I didn't even
Yeah.
get a chance last episode to remind everybody about him passing out diagonally on a small wooden chair in a 97-piece suit in that original silent version, which I always find very funny.
And we're not too far away here because this would be like Edgar Allan Poe died in the middle of the 1800s. So this is like before that even. So, he could have a 97-piece suit on. I really like the idea of a 97-piece suit because that is pretty much where we're at. What's interesting, I had looked up Barbara Steele a little more. She was married to a Poe, and I'm not sure the relationship, if that Poe, because it's not a very common last name really, had been related to a cousin or one of the one of the brothers did have children, so there are descendants of Poe's relations, not Edgar Allan Poe himself, of course, but there are descendants of the relations. So she was married to a Poe for a number of years, which I just think is just so like she gets all the goth points for that, let alone being in this movie.
Yeah, she really knows. I had no idea that that was true. It'd be interesting. It'd be interesting if it was just a coincidence or if there was something actually there. But I can tell you what is really there, Lydia. What is really absolutely there. Apparently, Elizabeth, because I don't know if they actually have sex. They do pan to the flame, which ignites in passion, but they do make out a lot. And that seems to be enough. And then they're basically just betrothed at this point. Like Alan's like sleeping on her chest, and then he is going to get a bit of a fright because he doesn't hear her heartbeat. Elizabeth informs him that she is dead. He thinks that she's joking. And then here comes Herbert, shirtless muscle man Herbert, who, by the way, was a double in a lot of those old Steve Reeve movies.
Oh, really?
Yeah, those Hercules movies and stuff like that. This guy is a very in shape man, and he comes in and runs Elizabeth through with a sword, and Alan gives chase and shoots him because Alan, by the way, has a little derringer, and he is going to shoot Herbert, and Herbert's going to collapse and then vanish. So not only, Lids, are these ghosts that you can touch and feel and talk to and probably have sex with, you can shoot them with a fucking gun and they'll react as if you've shot them with a gun.
Now, I was quite shocked by the appearance of Herbert. There was a note from Herbert that was left on a desk that I think alluded to him meeting her later or something
That's
like that. So
correct,
you knew
yes.
that, yes, she had, because I couldn't read it. It was so he was sort of alluded to in theory. So I did not expect a shirtless muscle man to come busting in as he did. It was a very exciting little scene because at this to this point it's been really quiet, a quiet little ghosty gothy love story, which isn't completely out of place for the time because yes, there was very less people, but as soon as you like spend any time in a bed with somebody, then you are basically betrothed for real at that
Yeah,
point. So
especially in
you've
those
got this
days.
like yeah, like very sleepy little romance almost happening in this kind of horror movie set, and then it becomes an action film. Yeah, it was quite eye-opening, and it helps with the pace too, because we're getting close to like halfway through this movie, really honestly.
It really does bring a little bit of Captain Blood to the whole proceedings. And this is where Alan is going to find himself alone. He goes back to the bedroom and is as if nothing was ever there or even disturbed. And he did see Herbert vanish before his very eyes after he shot him. And so thoroughly confused, he is going to need an expert, Lydia. He's going to need somebody to explain what the hell is going on around these here parts. And enter a fucking quack. Let's just call him what he is.
Yeah.
Dr. Karmas is going to enter the scene.
What I really like here is that as an audience member, you don't really realize that this is the haunting, right? Took me a bit anyway. That I'm like, you expect there's going to be like ghosties and things popping out and skeletons in coffins or whatever, like whatever haunted house bullshit that you would expect from a 1960s black and white horror film. But no, you almost want this guy to approach Dr. Blackwood later and be like, "You didn't tell me that it was haunted by ghosts that would fuck with me," because this is like some deep fucking with here. You got people attacking you, stabbing your new wife or whatever the hell, your new girlfriend. Your new girlfriend's fucking with you because she's a ghost. Like everyone here is dead. Like that would be so realistic. Like you want to expect that you're going to encounter like the librarian in Ghostbusters or Slimer. But no, you get these ghosts that will fuck with you. Well, really? And I think that that was his problem. And it was my problem as an audience that, I had a feeling by this point that Dr. Karmas was dead too, but like you don't want to believe it. And you put yourself in his shoes at that point by him also not wanting to believe that these are ghosts.
Karmas is going to be a person who is kind of known, at least by reputation, from by Alan. He says that, "Oh, I'm aware of you in the various papers that you write, but we haven't heard, no one's heard from you in a little while." That's because Karmas is dead. He, like we learn, many people have entered this place never to return. And Karmas is going to lay out the most insane nonsense cockamamie 18 something theory I've ever heard in my entire life. We are beyond the realm of the ether. We are now going to say that there are three distinct stages of existence of the body, the soul, and the senses. And he attributes ghost activity to the senses that fight to keep the body alive after death. So let's review. By the way, he's going to try to prove this by cutting the head off of a snake. This was a real snake, mind you. They killed a snake for this ridiculous theory, and to, it was the olden days, and unfortunately it does happen. There's no excuse for it, but it did. The weirdest and most macabre thing about it is while Alan watches him decapitate this fucking snake, he's like, "I conducted the same experiments as a boy." What? What are you talking about? First of all, what experiment? You're cutting the head off of a snake. Second of all, you don't even know what you're doing. Thirdly, you're not a scientist. You're a fucking journalist. Why were you cutting the heads off of a snake as a boy?
Allow me to elaborate why little boys would be, I don't know, skinning frogs alive, blowing them up with straws. I mean, seeing if they'll float, pouring salt on slugs, burning ants with a magnifying glass, cutting the heads off snakes because they continue to move. There's a nice video on YouTube of a girl preparing snakes for dinner, and they do continue to move like that. Like, if you wanted to see that, um, if you live on a farm like I did, I've cut snakes up, not for joy and not to see them move. It's not a nice feeling to realize they continue to move. Ugh. I don't like chickens are the same thing too, but when you're trying to like keep them away from your house, there's some tactics of, as soon as you see a snake on your property, cut up into a bunch of pieces and put them around the edges of your property. And then other snakes will be like, whoa, that's a no snake zone. And it works really well, obviously, because if you took a person and cut them the fuck up, they wouldn't continue to move, mind you. Just side note, asterisk, pin in that. But if you spread the fucking parts of a person around your property, the stench and the macabre sight alone would definitely communicate to people, like Vlad Tepish, our friend that we mentioned in the last episode, definitely experimented with, that people would be like, whoa, maybe we shouldn't go there. Snakes have the same sort of presence of mind, so to speak, and can smell dead snakes from miles away. So, like, yes, people have cut snakes up. There's something very different between encountering a snake in your garden, cutting it up, and putting it around your property for that. And it's not like folklore or a wives' tale. It really actually works. And fucking filming it. Like, there is something very different in animal torture and agriculture.
I guess I'm just too much of a city kid. I get so squeamish around hurting animals of any kind. And even though if it's like for a function, I'd just be like, ugh, it's so gross. But for a movie, it's, in my
And it's
opinion,
not a fun thing. Yeah.
yeah, in my opinion, for a movie, it's reprehensible. You didn't need to do that, particularly for this scene, which is ridiculous. But Karmas wants to convince Alan that this is how ghosts exist, is that they are responding to their senses not wanting the body to die. Now, the problem is just like in the snake demonstration, eventually, even with the senses employed, eventually that last synapse will fire and the body and head will die. But don't you worry, don't you fret, because these ghosts have an out for that. They require life, Lydia, which of course, as we know, is blood. So what we have here are ghosts that you can see, hear, talk to, touch, who are kept alive by drinking the blood of the living. Now, I'm not saying if it looks like a duck, sounds like a duck, walks like a duck, it's a duck. But these are fucking vampires.
Yeah, I don't know. Geese look like ducks and walk like ducks. And sort of talk
true.
like ducks too. Swans also. Swans, and we have two amazing specimens here of swans.
Swans are like a
And
beautiful duck.
yeah, and like you could mistake a duck for a swan. Like you could be like, the saying isn't walks like a swan, but like people would be like, a duck resembles a swan. I mean, they definitely resemble vampires, and we don't know every single, etymology of vampire here. We have some books on vampire taxonomy, but maybe we haven't encountered this kind of vampire before. Psychic vampires exist too, and they're very different. So like it feels very vampire-y to me though. And if you only watched half of this film and the rest got cut on the bulb and burnt in the projector, you'd probably assume that they turn out to be vampires.
I definitely thought that this was a vampire film when I first saw the box art, the English title of Castle of Blood. I just kind of assumed. But then I said, oh, they're ghosts. I understand. And then the way that they were operating, particularly when we get to Carmus's death scene. Now, one of the things that Carmus has the ability to do is to show Alan the history of this place. And so one of the side effects of that is Alan is not going to really be able to move or interact with anything that's happening in the past. He's going to be effectively frozen in time while all this stuff happens around him. While Carmus acts as his guide, holding, you guessed it, a candelabra. And
yeah, very Virgil and very Ebenezer Scrooge. You know, you got Ghosts of Christmas Past kind of stuff going on here. He does relate the story that the original Blackwood, the original name would be Black Blood, and he was a hangman back in the day. You know, he relates that story, but yeah, we get to go on almost a Shining-esque vision of the past.
It really is opulent. And if anything, it did end up making me, no, whatever Black Blood or Blackwood or whomever, this hangman from London who was given these special privileges because of his particular job. And I'm not sure if that was supposed to indicate anything other than he was an evil man. Are we supposed to believe that because he was a hangman, somehow that's related to why everyone that dies in this place is a ghost? It's hard to really say, but it seems to be they're saying it for a reason, hopefully. And so maybe the reason is that, but we get to see this place in all of its glory. And when I see the opulence, I see the party, I see everybody dancing and having a good time, the servants opening the door, and looking at the place the way that it is now. And we know from Elizabeth's own mouth that she has been dead for 10 years. So we know that the state of decay has been about a decade. And it just kind of sent me with this immense sadness looking at everything, because it was so nice here. And what was the tragedy that befell this place? I'm going to tell you what the tragedy of this place is, Lydia, and you, dear listeners. Elizabeth either can't keep it in her pants or doesn't know how to say no or whatever. And the craziest thing is Carmus is essentially going to be fine. His Virgil, like, let me show you how much your girlfriend fucked before she met you, because it is kind of outrageous.
It is some very pearl clutching sex. Like, quite literally, she clutches her pearls. She does. While she's getting going down on it, I suppose. I think that's what's happening.
Yeah, that is definitely what's happening.
They keep it really clean, though. So if you're not into like explicit porn and your Gothic horrors, then because typically it's not, right? Typically it's very chaste. So it was refreshing to see the tactic they took with this. With she is a harlot, you know.
It's kind of crazy because she is with somebody named William, I believe. And she is also seeing the stable boy, who is Herbert, our shirtless muscle man, who is she is going to steal away from him, from her husband or boyfriend or whomever, under the guise of saying goodbye to some friends who kiss her goodbye. That's also a very sad scene, knowing that she's dead now. And then it is her going to that barn that we've been to before, and Herbert's going to go down on her. And it is not explicit, but that is exactly what is going on. And this is not going to be the first time where I'm kind of taken aback by how sexy this film is. Like, listen, this film is a lot of sexy people. Herbert's never wearing a fucking shirt. And
yeah, now we have two shirtless wonders running around.
And Elizabeth is just falling out of her dress in this ballroom sequence where you're like, oh my God. But then we are going to cut to her having sex with William and Herbert in a jealous rage. You would think it'd be the other way around, like someone walking into the barn and being like, "Get your hands off her, you fiend." But it's not. It's Herbert like, "I can't stand to see you with this person. They have been sleeping together on and off for 3 months." And Herbert's sick of it. He's like, "I want you to leave this person. You're my woman." And she doesn't protest very hard. And then she literally, you could assume that maybe an hour, 2 hours later, whenever the party ends, she's now having sex with the other man. Herbert kills him, and then in a rage brings himself upon Elizabeth, and she's obviously distraught. Like, a dude just was murdered while he was inside of her, and his naked body is thrown about. Then in breaks Julia, who bashes Herbert's stupid head in with guess what? A candelabra. And then Julia is now like, "Good, these stupid men are gone, and now you and I can be together because we've already hooked up before and your place is with me." And then she basically forces herself on Elizabeth while there's bodies around them. And then Elizabeth pulls out her trusty, what do you call that? Like it's like a bookmark dagger, like a stiletto, and then stabs Julia to death. So in rapid succession, everyone that wanted to fuck her in this castle, presumably that was in the building, because I bet you there's others, are all murdered.
So I'm wondering if people have already started heading home from this ball. But this is why you leave the punk show before midnight, because everything gets fucking weird. People get horny and angry and drunk and vindictive, and you don't know who's banging who really honestly. So just pull an Irish exit and fucking leave before any of this shit happens.
This is some Sid Vicious stuff, man. It's time to go before everyone gets stabbed.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, gorgeous though, absolutely gorgeous throughout all of this. It is still a gothic horror at this point, because we have the opulence and the beauty, and the music swells. Even when we return from this vision to the spooky library, we get, the metal sheet that is the thunder sound and theremins and spooky saw sounds. But leading up to this, during the action sequences, the music does ramp up quite a lot. The music design of this is a little bit jarring because it's a little loud during those action sequences, and it's a little too quiet when they're spooking around, just creeping around this haunted place. But this scene is made all the more bombastic because of the use of the amazing music. And if you appreciate that sort of old-timey radio show or film music, then this film has that for you too. Like, it's not just all horror and gorgeous and opulence and spookiness and gothic and candelabras galore and ghosts. It's got everything. It's even got that sound design.
There is a lot of brass instruments in this score, and there is one melody that they play over and over again when the tension is supposed to ramp up, and it goes da-na-na, da-na-na. And the one thing that I find very distracting about that is if you go back and you watch the first Creature from the Black Lagoon movie, that is the same. In the Creature from the Black Lagoon movie, it's a little harsher, believe it or not, but it is the same da-na-na, 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 when the creature shows up. And I was curious, are they aping this, or is it just a coincidence? I don't know. But it's funny that you say that it's too loud, because the consensus amongst certain Universal fans is that, yeah, the score in the Creature from the Black Lagoon, when the creature shows up, is too goddamn loud. It's too harsh and shrill. And so it's not pleasant to listen. I couldn't imagine anybody, you know how a lot of people buy like those film scores. I couldn't imagine anybody buying the film score to Creature from, sorry for the hot take. I couldn't imagine anybody buying the record for this and just, I'm going to relax, have a beer, and listen to the Creature from the Black Lagoon soundtrack screeching in my fucking ears. And I kind of feel the same way about this, although I do really enjoy the theremin, as I've pointed out
Yeah, it's
before.
another instrument that's similar to the theremin is the oh, what do they call the licorice stick, the clarinet. Um, any of those alto instruments too are within the bandwidth of the human voice, and it's so much easier to capture even with a narrow bandwidth because we started capturing human voices. That was the point of a lot of recording technology, was to capture human voices. So that's where our technology was focused. So a lot of those instruments, and within a level of a human speaking voice, that can't like hit the decibels of a lot of these powerful instruments, especially brass instruments. Like our technology at the time just wasn't tuned into that. So anything that was close to a human voice, like clarinets, just sounded so good because that's where our technology was focused. Taking all of that into a modern surround sound, painful, because anything that's outside of the decibel level or lefts, whatever, if you're into like sound design and that bandwidth of a human voice, anything outside of that is just overblown and terribly distorted by nature. And then you're feeding it through a modern sound system of any sort. Painful. Yeah, you certainly cannot relax to that, no matter how much wizardry you put behind it, because it wasn't captured that way. There's no fixing it in post with a lot of these soundtracks, right? So the only thing you can do is turn the volume down and grit your teeth and wait for it to be over.
That's kind of where we are in our film now, too, because Carmus is going to enlighten us with the tale of his demise. Now, Carmus originally had come to this place to research his cockamamie theories about death, and he is going to be in the study. And at this point, the tragedies have happened, and he is convinced to go to Castle Blackwood. And the place is still not totally dilapidated, and it is a little run down, but not as dusty and cobwebby as it is when Alan is there. And he is going to, with a candelabra, do his own exploration of the castle as if he's seeing it for the first time. And this is going to take us down into the crypt. The crypt is a wonderful set. By the way, if you like Black Sunday, this scene seems almost ripped from that film. And we are going to see funnily enough, he is going to push the crypt open, and we are going to see what I first mistook as, and what my partner first mistook as when they saw the movie for the first time, as a nude, rotten woman with large bosoms. No, that's Herbert. His pectorals are so powerful that they cannot be rotted away, even in death. He has his pecs. He doesn't have his face anymore. It's kind of skeletal. But this is a really cool effect. I like the breathing and moving cadaver. What did you think of it?
I wrote in my notes just this breathing corpse effect is amazing. And it's not even like really complicated. It's not a very sophisticated physical effect at all. I mean, we could do this with our cell phones, for crying out loud. It's really not hard, and it's so effective because by this point, you're not used to seeing anything visceral. All these ghosts have been sort of figurative, and they all very human. There's no gore, there's no rot. Everything is just kept into this sort of slow, dusty decay around you, but the corpses, so to speak, the undead, the walking dead, or the ghosts, are all 100% perfectly human. So I think that it's the juxtaposition of like these beautiful, beautiful, beautiful women and men that are dead, with this breathing corpse. Beautiful. Really, really, really effective.
I was just so captivated by this sequence, and I already was into this film hook, line, and sinker. But when I got to this point, I really just loved that they saved it for this one sequence, because you're right. There are plenty of moments in this film where you could almost forget that anything visceral could ever happen. And in a weird way, much in the same way as, not to harken this back to Bava, because this is not a Bava film, but in the same vein of making these black and white Gothic horrors, people who are inspired by decades prior, the films that they grew up on would have been films from the 1930s and 40s. And then by the time you're in the 1960s, they are going to be making things, some people anyways, are going to be making things that evoke the films of old. And so there is a throwback quality to it where you feel as though you could be watching a Universal film or something from RKO, Poverty Row, or whatever those studios would have been churning out in the previous decades. But then there's these little hallmarks that you're watching what at the time would have been a modern movie of 1960s. And this is one of those moments where the effect is just so good and so visceral, and they would never really go there in any of the much older films because it is quite graphic. And again, all of the little earmarks of this being released in the 1960s where censorship laws had waned. All obviously these films that were getting made in Italy weren't really dependent on US censorship laws, so they could do pretty much what they felt that they wanted to do. And so it's just really interesting that how they blend the old with what would have been very new and very modern at the time. And so this scene just really sort of speaks to me in that way, where you are looking at these great special effects. But back to the probability of them being vampires, very high. Herbert is going to be the one that takes out Carmus, and he is literally going to bite his neck and drink the blood from it, like a Dracula.
Which is absolutely vampiric. Yes. I mean, you would feel foolish. Like, you're like, what do you mean they're not vampires? Like, come on, just say it already. That's how you sort of feel watching this. But you're also just enraptured by the tone of the film. And maybe it is something different. Isn't that always what we've wanted? And what even in the 60s people probably wanted? A twist on vampirism, something different, something new, something like it, something similar, because you don't want to just rehash Dracula, right?
No, you're absolutely correct about that. And also, I would mention that blending genres, blending ghouls, creating your own thing is precisely how we got films like Night of the Living Dead, and what rewrote what a zombie would be for all time, even though Romero repeatedly had said he never really thought of them as zombies. They were just inspired by I Am Legend, and in I Am Legend, those were vampires. So it's really interesting how things change in cinema and become laws. And I think that nowadays we're so fixated on making sure that we're categorizing things, but there's going to be yet another element of this film that seems ripped from another decade, Lydia, is because we are going to get a giggling young couple, newlyweds, that are now exploring the castle. This is supposed to be yet another couple of bodies that we can throw at this, and it's going to have all of the earmarks of a 1980s slasher.
Definitely bonus bodies, right? Like, that's my first thought was like, what do we need here? More bodies.
And boobs. We are going to get, I don't mean to be so crass, but it is one of the things that you had mentioned where you're like, oh my God, I didn't think we were getting this in this movie. I remember I kind of turned away from the film and then looked back and was like, oh my God, when the hell did this happen? Because we're going to get a young couple in there. They're going to be making out, going to the bedrooms. They're newlyweds. They want to have a good time, enjoy their stay, if you know what I mean. And they hear something. She tells her man to go check out that noise. And in the meantime, she gets out of her 15-layer dress and walks to the mirror and brushes her hair, and then gets attacked by Herbert. Now, Herbert does a lot of the legwork around here. He's like fucking bloodthirsty.
And it is like her dress and such is kind of like 50s. So I like that this sort of brings us to the modern. Like, okay, Elizabeth was only dead 10 years ago. It seems a lot longer ago than that. So maybe the time frame as a ghost is kind of lost, because this seems like so very modern, this couple. Herbert just pouncing on people and killing them at this point. So like, this is the problem here. Like these ghosts would just subsist entirely seducing people that come by, I guess. And maybe people would win this bet if it weren't for Herbert. He's the secret weapon here. He's just gonna kill everybody that comes in this goddamn castle. Was it told, like, I felt like I missed why this couple was even at the castle? Are they guests of the ball as well?
No, and the way that I am interpreting it, and everyone can, if somebody has better insight, they can correct me if I'm wrong. But this would have been the previous year's guests. They are there because Lord Thomas Blackwood has lent them the place to enjoy their honeymoon. And they had met him in town as excited newlyweds needing a place to stay, and he had suggested, well, I have just the place. I have a property that you can spend the night in. And they are treating it as such. They thought that they were going to have the place to themselves, and it was because of his generosity that they were there.
So then that is my theory, that he has that ace in the hole of Herbert, who will just basically slaughter everybody, whether they're banging Elizabeth or not.
Yeah, because I guess it kind of depends. I'm kind of being hard on old Elizabeth here, but it is egregious when you, because of people lusting after you, which is not your fault, but you seem to have been sleeping with all of them. And you did pounce on Alan the moment he got into the building. And Julia and the other ghosts, it just seems so done with her just being just so horny at all times. And so it's hard to argue with anybody about the opinions of Elizabeth, but I think it could be an attempt that, Lord Blackwood is just trying to perpetuate his sister's existence. It could just be like, well, if they died in this tragedy, because by the way, Elizabeth doesn't get murdered in that massacre. She ends up killing herself. She's buried in the graveyard because of the tragedy. It was just too much. And honestly, I couldn't imagine being witness to a triple murder that was 1,000% your fault. And her being as extra as she is, deciding to take her own life because of it. But once these two bonus bodies are gone, it's now Alan's turn. And we see every ghost in the house begin to turn on him, with the exception of Elizabeth, which is going to say that they want his blood, and so I'm going to help you get out of here. It seems that Elizabeth is either passive or not reluctant in the past about what's going on, but Alan is special. He's different. And so she is going to be his guide to get through this labyrinth. Again, we're going through this gorgeous set as he is being surrounded by William and Julia. Herbert, of course, he's got to be there now, sporting like that big wound on his face. And even our newlyweds, they're there. They're there very briefly, but it's to give you an indication that sure enough, basically every year, or as many times as they can muster it, more people are brought to this house, more people are killed, more people eternally now are forced to live out the moments of their death. And if they want to perpetuate their own unlife, which is what they do want, because none of them are ready to die, they admit that, they need their blood to keep their unlife perpetually going.
I really like the theory of Karmas with the blood just keeps the senses ticking just enough to keep the body going. So they are flesh and blood, like he said. Like, you've helped these people, you can feel them trembling, you can feel their skin, like they're very much alive. Even the newlyweds, the Perkins, and I remembered that only because of the Anthony Perkins, Oz Perkins kind of horror royalty again thing. Like, these two people also reminded me of more horror royalty, the twins in The Shining, with like, come and play with us forever and ever and ever, is sort of the kind of like the card they play. Like, yes, we're going to drink your blood and it will kill you, but it's not the end, right? So it's not all bad. but they're still converging on him. And it is a very horror movie moment. You've got the high stakes of his own life for his blood to keep them alive. And we've gotten to know some of these ghosts, and some of them are a little endearing. Not Herbert, but the rest. And it kind of creates that push and pull of like, you kind of want him to give in to them. You want him to attempt to flee also, with Elizabeth, who's offering to help him at this point. We have some really good music ramping up, screeching, however it may be. But we also have the use of a bit of camera angle, a little bit of verite, a little bit of a Dutch tilt from time to time, which is a totally new aspect in this film. It's been very straightforward filmmaking up until this point. So now we're getting a little more experimental. So we've gotten a little experimental with our effects, with a breathing corpse, and now the camera itself and the expressions on our cardboard cutout's face, because he actually looks scared and surprised.
He is scared. He's surprised. He's tripping over what? Candelabras? He wants to get out of this place. Now, my favorite chase sequence in this film is, of course, he wants to drag Elizabeth with him, and she is exhaustively trying to explain that she can't go with him. She can't go on. She can't cross that threshold. And he, in the meanwhile, is trying to get her through this. There's trees, there's hanging corpses all amongst the trees, and there's fog, and there's a lot of atmosphere, and she collapses to the ground, and he is going to watch her decay in real time before his eyes. And it's a fairly simple fading effect that goes to, like a Spirit Halloween skeleton, but wearing...
I expected so much more.
I really did too, but it's okay. I get what they mean. It was only slightly disappointing, but I really wanted to get your take on this ending, because our protagonist does not make it.
No. And it is very Edgar Allan Poe for somebody to be running from the haunted palace and then get hung up at the last minute by Herbert, I suppose, because he's that, card up the sleeve.
It's hard to say. It's like the
was it Mr. Perkins? Like, it could have been any of the guys.
The fence. It's like the fence closes and there's some kind of straight implement. Now, the first time I watched this movie, I actually rewound this portion because I was not at all certain how Alan had died. And he gets...
It felt like a sword or something coming through the fence in a way.
It's part of the fence.
If the ghost can't leave, can they throw it?
It looked as though it's a part of the fence. But it's weird because when he's entering the first time we see this fence, it's a cast iron fence in about like 10 feet high. And it's got these hooks on it that hook upwards and outwards. Now, initially, I thought the fence door closed abruptly and it skewered him on this hook through the back of the neck. But you're right. The piece of iron that goes into his neck is straight, and even the angle that closes the door, it's not entirely clear how he was impaled by the neck. But what is clear is he's impaled in the neck, and it pins him in a standing position outside of the grounds of the castle where he dies. And wouldn't you know it, just as that happens, Poe and his friend arrive. His friend, and they think, there's Alan. He did it. He's just standing outside. And they realize
he's waiting for us.
They realize too late that, oh no, indeed, he did die. Now, his friend takes the moment to take that 10 pounds. He robs a corpse. He's like, sorry. He's like, basically, sorry, old chap, but you did lose the bet. He takes 10 pounds out of this dead man's fucking wallet. And then as him and Poe walk away back into the carriage, and he just says, I'll get someone to bury him in the park. And like, that's it. And I just kept thinking, Is that what life was like back then? You could like go to a bar, run into Edgar Allan Poe, get challenged to a Scooby-Doo bet, get killed and pinned to a thing. Alan has expressed that he doesn't really have any family and he's like a terribly lonely guy, but I'm sure people knew who the fuck he was, and you're just gonna, what, anonymously bury him? He's not even from here. He said he was from London, so you're just gonna bury him randomly here? You literally got him killed. And you're just like, I'll just get someone to bury him in the park. And then as they leave, Poe's just like, no one's going to believe this. As implying that here comes another spooky tale from Edgar Allan Poe.
Which is the perfect ending, like so perfect. But it answers a lot of questions for me. Like, how do these rich aristocrats keep their castles going? Well, they make bets with hapless individuals for what could have been $166,000. So making $166,000 a year, I mean, he's probably got other monies, old monies. He does some sort of work, I'm sure, or something, or does something else for money. But that $166,000 that he would get from some people who bet him $100 or £100 at the time would probably keep that old palace going for the year. You know, even $16,000, you know, it probably keeps the lights on, so to speak. Keeps him in tallow for candles, because those are in no short supply. But yeah, I like that. And I like the idea that he is just going to bury him in the park on the grounds with the other ghosts, and he's going to now join the throng. Mm-hmm. And they don't like spell it out, but that's exactly what's going to happen, because Karmas has said Elizabeth is buried right there, and it's obviously just on the grounds, that graveyard on the grounds where everyone ends up. I really like this ploy. I'm sure they could get away with burying people just namelessly at this time, for sure.
Not since
no one's going to come looking for them.
Not since Loomis got that guy killed in Halloween 2 and just kind of walked away from the whole thing. Ben Tramer, like when he got Ben Tramer killed, and he's just like, well, anyway, let's go find Michael Myers. I was like, you got a teenage boy killed, burned alive because of your shenanigans. But no, and he's not even rich, so there's no excuse. But these guys are rich. Now I do like, they try to make sure that they don't kill you tragically, Lydia, with a little ADR. There's a little ADR where you hear Elizabeth's voice, and it's like, oh, Alan, you stayed for me, didn't you? And he goes, yes, Elizabeth, mi amor. And then it's like, Finn. And I'm like, that's just what you say. You can't leave anyway. And I just got this picture of like, Alan, did you get yourself killed and stay behind because you love me? And he's like, yeah, that's what I did. Because now you just have a hot ghost girlfriend that you're with eternally. But that wasn't his plan. He was literally trying to leave the property. He got killed by accident.
He did get killed by accident. And I don't know how that would pan out for him, because he would have Herbert on his ass every single day. The shirtless wonder raging after him.
I don't think Herbert's very cool about it. And Julia might be cool about it in sort of a waspy way, like it'd be a lot of sarcastic comments. But don't forget that Elizabeth's actual husband is also there. So like there's there's literally so many people. And so what, you're just gonna have a peaceful existence with Elizabeth now with 3 other people that were also fucking her, that got murdered because of her? It doesn't make any sense.
And it's only a matter of time if she hadn't already got the hots for Mr. Perkins and try and steal, or Mrs. Perkins, who knows?
A lot of sexy shenanigans in Castle Blackwood.
There's more trouble. Absolutely. So yeah, it's way more sexy, especially with the titties and crinoline. We have almost like a bullet bra, 1950s bullet bra thing going on with Mrs. Perkins. And her walking around in a totally see-through crinoline topless is just unbelievable for the era, I think. Not that I've seen a lot of 60s films that are supposed to be Gothic horrors.
That's
But
true, yeah.
very sexy. Yeah, very, very sexy.
But we'll have to remedy that. But in the meantime, what do we got next for him?
Coming up next, we have the Tales from the Crypt film. Not the comic book, not the TV show, but the film. And this film has a little bit of dead air horror history because it does have a segment it's a Christmas segment with a crazed Santa Claus, a killer roaming the town and being announced on the radio as a escaped lunatic that I remember from being a kid as a crazy Santa menacing through a window at a woman. And I remember that scene very clearly as a kid. So I am very curious if I remember the rest of the show because I haven't watched the whole film maybe ever.
I watched these sequences. I know what sequences are in the movie. Well, I've watched the movie. But the first time that I encountered all of these sequences by themselves, at some point they did splice these in with the episodes of the HBO Tales from the Crypt series. Because I know the first time I saw the Santa Claus sequence, it was an episode of the HBO series. And when I eventually saw the movie for rent in the video store, I remember flipping the box around and seeing that Santa and being, oh, this is just episodes from the TV show. And we rented it, and it was quite different because it's very, very different from the HBO show. Not to say nothing of the Crypt Keeper. And we can go into a little bit of EC Comics history with that. So I'm very excited to tackle this and to see how your memory holds up.
Speaking of comics, check out TN Comedy's show on YouTube. He's been doing a lot of polls because when he goes on tour with his comedy, he stops by comic book stores, and you want to see some really cool, more modern comics alongside old comics. Check out Thomas's channel. The shameless plug for Thomas's channel because I love it.
Yeah, poor Thomas. I get DMs from him fairly regularly where he's like, Wes, have you heard about this comic book series? And my answer is always no. I've fallen so far out of the comic book scene that I don't really know a lot of the newer indie titles that are coming out, but it's nice of him to keep me informed. And if you want to be informed, check out his channel. But if you want to be informed about horror movies, you check out our podcast that you're listening to right now.
I mean, you could check out Typical Books too, but I'd check out The Horror Historian, who is Wes.
That is me, but Typical Books of Terror on YouTube is my favorite because I like to watch you while I eat. I eat my breakfast or my lunch. And if you have a new video, I put you on the big TV. So you're like life size in my living room. And I'm listening to you talk about books. And I'm like, oh man, you did one about the Polybius, the 2 or 3 videos ago. And
Polybius.
Yes, Polybius. Mm-hmm. And I'm very interested in getting that book because I love that urban legend. And so I would be interested to see how they turn that into a whole book.
Oh, I'm excited too. You can catch us on YouTube as well. There's a Dead Air channel, so definitely check that out.
Yeah, we're on YouTube now. But in the meantime, I'm Wes Knight.
And I'm Typical Lydia.
And you've been listening to the comedy stylings of Dead Air. If you like this show, you can find more episodes and other content on splatterpictures.net, Spotify, or wherever you download podcasts. We also upload all episodes to YouTube now, if you'd prefer to listen that way. You can find us across social media like Instagram, X, and TikTok, and the show is edited by Lydia Peaver and hosted by Lydia Peaver and me, Wes Knight. We'll see you next time.
music by Anorex at anorex.com.